I think breath is one of the most underutilized and underappreciated tools that we all have to affect and change our consciousness at any given moment, right? So I'm just actually going to take a breath right now. I encourage everybody listening to do the same. And I just notice even after taking that one breath, my presence and my consciousness shifts just a little bit, and there's more ease, there's more relaxation, and there's more expansiveness, and there's less of a pressure to need to fill with lots of words quickly. In the sexual context, a couple of weeks ago, my partner and I were making love, and she was on top of me, and I could tell from the look in her eyes, she was wanting to go into that sort of primal animalistic thing. And I was feeling that too. And I thought, oh, okay, here's one of those moments where like, I know what's coming. Like the wild hurricane of amazing sexual pleasure is about to happen. I've got to prep myself for this. And so I started breathing like, like really getting into exaggerating it, as a practice to boost my system up. And I think of it sort of as surfing. Like if I see the wave off in the distance and I'm on a board, I have to start paddling in order to prep myself to be able to catch the wave. And if I have enough momentum, I can catch it and ride those waves of pleasure and I can be fine. But if I don't have enough, momentum, the waves are going to pass me and I'm going to not get it, or I'm going to catch it wrong and crash, right? And so the breath is the way of prepping to catch the wave for myself, so that then when we're going wild and crazy together and all this chaotic physical movement, like I'm not going towards the point of ejaculation.
And why not? What exactly happens when you start breathing like that inside of your body? Like, what do you feel? What changes?
Yeah, I just feel expansion. I guess somatically, I feel sizzles. I feel like, the static on old TV. I feel just expansion and openness and less pressure in my genitals. It's like the pressure that would normally be in my genitals when I'm inside my partner expands to the rest of my body. And it's not like this balloon that wants to push it out my penis. It's like all of a sudden, oh, this is just naturally sort of flowing more easily through the rest of my body. And my body isn't pushing me towards the ejaculatory reflex anymore.
Yeah.
So like breath, like active breathing, like overactive breathing, at least for a little bit to prep the system, is a huge thing in the sexual context and in self-pleasure, which is number 3, but you look like you're about to say something.
So are you inhaling through your nose conscientiously, or are you just inhaling through your mouth?
I think in those moments, like whatever you can do it.
Yep.
Preference generally for inhaling through the nose. Side note, there's erectile tissue in 2 different parts of the male body. One of them is here, one of them is in the penis. Some people say they're linked. So I like to breathe through my nose in sex.
Okay. You said here, but for those of us just listening to audio, you pointed to your nose. So there's erectile tissue in your nose, and you also held your crotch. So I'm sorry for those of you who missed that visual, but that's what happened.
Yeah. Nose and crotch in male bodies. I believe also in the clitoris.
Yes. So I love that description of what's happening when you breathe, because it's true for me in a female body as well. But I know that that's what's happening in a male body. It's almost like as sexual pleasure builds and as turn on builds, it's almost like your body is designed to start. It's almost like your pelvis feels like it's starting to contract and the pressure is building inside of your testicles, inside of your cock. And it's almost preparing for liftoff. It's like the rocket, like the fuel is starting to push. Yeah. So like the rocket of ejaculation happens. And when you start doing that deep breathing, it's like it releases the pressure. It takes the fuel from going out of your penis and towards ejaculation, and it like actually like brings the fuel into your body, expands and brings it upwards. Okay. So you're simultaneously taking the pressure off of your penis, and you're starting to feel more turn on throughout your body. And the reason that you want to do that before, like you're saying, like I'm starting to anticipate it's going to get hotter, it's going to get more intense, is because once you've waited too long to start that breathing, it's like you're past the point of no return. Yeah. Because once you've built too much pressure into this like rocket ship of ejaculation, you can't depressurize anymore. So when you start breathing ahead of time, it's like you're taking the pressure off. And then once it starts building, that circuit is already underway where you're actually lifting the pressure off as you fuck or as you feel more pleasure. And that's what allows, it's almost like a system that you have to kick into gear before it gets too intense.
So to be clear, like as soon as I recognize that I'm about to start being sexual with somebody, I start breathing more deeply as a practice. Like I call it sexual breath work, and it's simple. I just start breathing more deeply to prime that pump. And I do that throughout the sexual experience. And when I anticipate things are going to get more intense, then I ramp the breath up, and you might think, oh, but that's labor. Oh, but I have to work for it. Yeah. Yes. And the doors you open from that are fucking incredible. So why would you not do that? Like it can be so much better than the typical sexual experience. You just have to prime your system.
Totally.
Shall we do some sex magic?
Yes, let's do sex magic. And the last piece I'll just say about that for people listening is there's this other option, which is, my partner recently, I think it's more sexy and it works better when you start doing the breath ahead of time and it depressurizes so that you can keep going. But my partner will actually say, hey, Layla, can we take a break for just a minute? And I'm going to breathe, because that depressurization can also work. It's like if he feels like he's getting real close to the point of no return, we can actually just stop. And he can do that breath. And it also depressurizes it and allows him to have a moment to reset and keep going.
Yeah. Well, let me riff on one more thing then.
Yeah.
And the breath and the like that sort of thing also gives the man an opportunity to make sound.
Yeah.
Sound is another huge thing that can be really helpful to release the tension that otherwise would be released through ejaculation. Yeah. And this is another interesting piece, that if a man chooses to not ejaculate with a woman, a lot of women's sexual programming is wrapped up in like whether or not they're able to make the man ejaculate. And so usually women don't see men in pleasure except for those 7 seconds of ejaculation. A lot of times men are just sort of like stoic in the bedroom, like, this is great. The woman's wondering like, is he experiencing pleasure? I don't know, but I feel really good, So if a man's actually exhibiting pleasure, like, it feels so good. Like getting into it like that, like then it's an opportunity, yes, to release that tension that otherwise would push you towards ejaculation, and to be generative in the sexual experience, to exhibit that you're experiencing pleasure, and that'll offer the opportunity to be in more pleasure, and it kind of uplifts and amplifies the whole thing.
Totally. And the sounding tones the vagus nerve. So you're also switching from your vagus nerve building up towards the ejaculation reflex. Yeah. You're actually calming your vagus nerve and toning it, which actually lets your nervous system ride the waves of pleasure more easily.
Yeah. And a lot of guys aren't naturally vocal. I absolutely wasn't. Like, this is something I had to work a lot on. The messages I got around sex from my family growing up were, sex is nice, but it should be done in private behind closed doors. Nobody should know about it. You should never talk about it. Don't get caught. Don't make sounds. Like, shut it down and have it in a nice little box away from everything else, So the idea of making sound and being heard was terrifying. And it actually shut my system down and actually prevented me from having an erection sometimes, even the thought of doing that.
Yeah. And I will just say that I think it's so much more of a turn on making love with men who are vocally expressive, who you can actually feel that they're in pleasure. You can feel the movement of their bodies. You can feel the expression of their voice. And you can do that in, for men who are like, oh, that could feel feminine. Mm-hmm. You can do that in a way that feels deeply masculine, like deeply hot, deeply expressive. It's actually a bigger turn on. And I used to spend my whole time being like, is he turned on? And then when he'd come, I'd be like, is he in pain?
Because the visual is like, you're not sure, because it looks like sometimes,
Totally.